Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today. This is our fifth session in our Emerging Technologies Lunch and Learn series. Today, we're going to be talking about using low-code, no-code technologies to solve IT challenges in government healthcare. The format of this session will be panel style, where you'll hear from each of our experts, which I'll introduce later. Before we get to introductions, let's do a bit of housekeeping. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We want to hear from our audience, but the first part of this session will be for questions among the panel members. If you have a question, please post it to chat, and once we're done with the initial panel session, we will get to your questions and answer them. So we look forward to interacting with you. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Paul Williams, Vice President of Solutions for Koniag Government Services. Today, I have a great lineup of experts in both automation as well as healthcare. And we'll start with Liam Toth, former CMIO of the Air Force. We also have Dustin Sexton. He's our Vice President and Salesforce Practice Lead in our growth organization. We have Karen Hay, Digital Health Transformation Executive from Salesforce. Karen Chapman is our Director of Automation for Koniag Government Services. Now we're just going to jump right in. We're going to start off with apologize for the slides delay. We're going to jump right off into what is low code. So Karen, do you mind kicking us off there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paul. So low code is an amazing phenomenon that has absolutely changed the way that we think about creating, building, enhancing, and maintaining applications in every possible way. So low code overall is a broad term that refers to software or platforms that let people build applications or features with minimal coding using pre-built interfaces or sometimes pre-built interface components. And what this means is you get to maximize your efficiency while minimizing your costs and your time to market. So, and when I say minimize time to market, I mean I've built a low-code application that currently saves the Army $29.3 million a year. And we built that application within 30 days of contract sign. So that time to market, when I say small, boy howdy, I mean tiny. So overall, if I had to say what are the things low code brings, it's scalability, agility, reusability. But those are all such broad terms, and I'm a pretty brass tacks kind of gal. So what does that really mean? You can think of low code platforms, and I'm talking here about lots of different kinds of software like Salesforce and Appian and so forth. You can think of these almost like whenever you're building a house, let's say that you have a builder that you're going to use, and the builder has 10 different styles of house pre-configured, and you can pick which one you like the most and have that house built for you. And then you have customizations, of course. You can choose the kind of countertop. I want wood floors. I'd like marble countertops. Whatever those customizations are, you can choose those individually, right? But you don't have to do all the crazy, hard, laborious work of designing that house from scratch. That is the equivalent of what I would say low code is for applications. It's a way to take all the hard work out and just get what you need from a preset number of options that will always meet your need in all of the ways you have. From a developer perspective, what does this mean, this low code situation? So I, in another life, was a full stack developer and still like to pretend I am one. So I can tell you that as a full stack developer, you spend countless hours in front of a blank screen trying to write out line by line by line of code. If you've ever opened up a Word document and had to write something from scratch and you don't know where to start, and you have that blinking cursor that's just mocking you for not already having written something, that's what being a developer feels like. It's very overwhelming, and it takes a long time to even come up with a way to design this thing. And then you write a bunch of code, you think you did great, you go to bed, congratulate yourself, you start work the next day, you look at your code, it's garbage, you throw it out, you start again. Or even worse, you have 200 lines of code, but it doesn't work, and you spend 5 hours debugging just to find that you forgot one comma on one line of code. These are very normal developer experiences that I can tell you I've had firsthand. Low code removes all of that. because it has pre-built code that you just simply drag and drop onto the screen. So all of those lines of code that otherwise I, at least as a developer, messed up every time are now pre-written for me. So this saves a lot of time and gets us into time to market reduced dramatically, as well as cost being reduced dramatically. Also great about low code, there's a lot of cybersecurity standards built in. We also have licensing for low code. That means that you pay for one license per user, and then that user can access every single application or feature you build within that platform. So rather than having to buy licenses for each individual application you're building, one license, one user, as many applications or features as you need on that. Lots of other huge benefits of low code, no code. And I know we were on the last slide that we saw quickly, but lots of different platforms for this as well. Appian, UiPath, Salesforce, ServiceNow, lots that you've, Uncork, Pega, lots that you've heard about. These are all those platforms that offer this kind of drag and drop code functionality that brings so many benefits. And as you can see on this slide, just a few of those benefits. Some are the streamlined ATO process. So much to say about this. First of all, ATOs through reciprocity are probably the best way, right, that we can go about getting an ATO. And most of these platforms have been ATO'd. And so we can always use that as a very quick way to get to an ATO. The platforms are often FedRAMPed. And then one of the greatest things about these is that you're ATOing the platform, not every individual application you're building. So once you've got that ATO in place for the whole platform, you can build all of the applications you might need. And that kind of building multiple applications within one platform actually leads to one of the other points on this slide, those increased returns on investments. So we highly advise that you start with a cell of people within your organization that are dedicated to the low code approach through a particular platform. Having that group of people that are doing this, not on a one-off nature, but that's what they're doing. They're really focused on this. It brings so many returns that are exponentially growing. And that's because, like I said, you can build more and more of those apps. And of course, you have the simplified licensing, which means everyone can continue using all of them. You also then have reusable code. So a lot of times the structure and organization of those drag and drop pieces of code can be reused across multiple different applications. So you've got the return on investment of that reusable code being used across all of your apps. It's also very, very easy to I almost don't want to tell anybody how easy it is because it makes my job seem too easy, but it's so easy to integrate low code platforms with other systems and apps. So getting all that information back and forth, that brings you some returns on investment. And then once you have that cell in there working and really digging in, of course, they're getting lessons learned from all of the low code work that they've done in the past. They're building relationships within the organization, and they come to be seen as a group of people who will deliver solutions that radically change your work life really fast. And then people will come out of the woodwork to ask for more of those kinds of things from a cell that's doing that. And so, and then finally, being able to be in a team working like that, you learn over time how to quickly identify really great options for process improvement through low code solutions. So the pattern begins to establish and you see how to do it, you can talk to anybody about what their job looks like and you'll hear it instantly. Oh, that would be a great way for us to bring low code solutions there. And these also, one of the great benefits of these kinds of applications are that they will help you identify and then cleanse anomalous data by noticing any discrepancies between data that were unexpected. And they codify your business processes as well, so that they're performed the same every time across time and across developers. Legacy code, therefore, becomes much easier to also manage. And this means that things like cybersecurity, compliance, standards, and requirements, all of those things are being met with low code in a way that we can never do with traditional development. And I know particularly in healthcare, those compliance standards so important. A great example for me is my dad was in the Army, and I remember once going to the doctor, and if you've ever had to go to the doctor with your dad being in the Army, the first question they ask you is, what are your sponsor's last four? Meaning, what is his social security number? And that's how they identify my healthcare benefits. Well, somebody manually typed my dad's last four in incorrectly. And I was stuck with a massive bill that took months of calling to get his last four digits of his social fixed. Well, what if instead of somebody typing that in, a low code situation had automatically pulled that information and moved it around for me? Would have saved me a lot of time and worry. So those kinds of ways low code can really bring compliance and standards across many different types, HIPAA, 508, all of those kinds of standards pre-built in lots of these low code solutions. And there's so many more things I want to talk about because I love this. I'm going to pass it back over to Paul so we can hear from everybody else on our panel.
Yeah, thank you. I think that gives a really great platform for what no code is as we get into some of the functional use cases. One thing I want to point out, I don't think you mentioned, maybe you did, but no need to manage the infrastructure on platform in many of these cases, right? So if you're buying these things as SaaS, your operations team can get a lot smaller and focus on other things. So that's a pretty major benefit to some of these platforms. Okay, thank you. We're going to jump over into talking about some of the functional use cases. So Liam, would you mind talking about some of your experiences since you just came from the Air Force as a CMIO?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that surprised me, I think, in healthcare. And one of them is that there are a lot of physician coders. And nights and weekends, these guys were off kind of doing these little one-off platforms, and it took them years to develop something, and they kind of got adopted. The problem with that, there's no maintenance opportunity for it. So a lot of the work that went on initially was figuring out, these things that people are using, how do we actually bring that into this modernized process as something that's maintainable, especially for, from a medical services standpoint, not always the most robust financially accountable area within the DoD. And so a lot of it was really looking at what are they doing out there and how can we start bringing some of that stuff in. So some of the first ones that I always like to point out were things like having resources for the clinical staff that were very specific to maybe the military medical system. So medical standards, for instance, is one that there's very specific medical standards for flyers and for continuing in service. And there was no way to consolidate all those resources. So one of the first things we started seeing is there's this need for resource consolidation. So we started pulling that in, and to be able to actually do something that could be sustainable was huge for us. Also, clinical staff really like to interface outside of the medical record, and there really wasn't, Facebook was the only one that was getting it done for a while. How do we do that so that the resources are there, so that they have everything that they need to do their kind of routine and daily job, have resources that are consolidated? Training platforms was another one, probably one that actually embraced this the most, because it allowed us to really bolt into a lot of things that were getting done. So things like being able to do tracking and tracing of the all of the trainings that were required from the medical perspective, but also being able to supply the training right there in the same platform, all because it was kind of consolidated together or interfaced appropriately. And finally, some of the other big efforts were tracking our military capabilities. If you were doing procedures outside of the hospital, we needed a way to be able to track and trace that and to be able to identify where gaps were, because we wanted people to be ready for, downrange activities. We didn't have a way to do that. So trying to figure out how do we do that stuff, but we needed something that you actually could start to interface in our medical records with. And so those became really important stuff. Now I'm going to point out that everything that I just mentioned are all non-patient facing activities, because that's what we were constrained by most of the time. And then all of a sudden, we had this huge pandemic come up, and all of a sudden, we had an opportunity that has never really been there before. HIPAA was relaxed. It was not eliminated, but relaxed. Money, it seemed, fell out of the sky for medical for the first time ever. And so we started looking at what else do we need to do. So all of a sudden, a lot of the other things that are on this list, you start to see, we need a way to do inventory management today. Or, hey, we have a new vaccine that's going to get released in a week and a half, and we have no way to track this in an inventory system. And our current system, it's going to maybe take 6 months to add a new vaccine to. How are we going to do this? So this provided opportunities to be able to do that, especially complex things that were changing very quickly. When I was starting looking at what locations does it need to go to, do they have the right equipment there to take the vaccine that we think we can get there? There was no way to do that, and we had to do it quickly. And so these are the great ways that we could start to do that stuff. Probably the biggest one that we really had to do stuff with, appointing is something that is generally not handled well for something that doesn't have the restrictions of the electronic health record and insurance. And so we really needed a way to institute an appointment scheduling system and to be able to scale it from a single facility that was utilizing this to something that could go to 700 facilities and track multiple different kind of vaccine requirements. And so being able to do something that had all of those use cases in there and be able to say, hey, how do we pull this into the next, larger scale? This was the only thing that would have got it done in an appropriate amount of time that was still allowed to interface with some of our systems.
That's a great point. So a couple of things I want to hit on that you said. So scaling it, because it's a SaaS platform, you can leave that to the platform, right? So you just need to focus on the functionality. And one of the other great things I like about the low code environments is it enables some citizen development. And people feel different. Each person feels a little differently about citizen development, but it happens whether you want it to or not, right? So enabling people to get these capabilities quickly is very important. I want to ask you one more question. We cannot have any presentation these days without talking about AI. So talk to me a little bit about AI and how, all of these platforms are incorporating that in. So what are some of your AI use cases from a low code perspective?
Yeah, I think, one of the nice parts about these low code kind of platform built capabilities is because your data generally sits in a place and can be utilized in multiple different ways that you don't even expect that it might need to be used in the future. I think analytics is by far one of the most exciting pieces that can come out of low code capabilities. And AI is primed for that. One of the things that I often tell people, like, AI is good at some stuff. It's not good at other stuff, but some stuff it's good at. One thing it's great at, frankly, is being able to look at large data sets and come up with relationships that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And I'll defer a little bit of this to Karen as the epidemiologist in the house on the difficulty of those things. But I will say that, being able to apply the AI resources to an analytics platform without having to go to another platform to be able to ATO another AI platform to put on top of the data there's so much stuff that allows this capability set to say, hey, I want to find things that no longer are doing just descriptive analytics, which I think unfortunately is where in government most of the time we are. And I don't even want to do predictive analytics. Now I've got something that can come in and do prescriptive analytics and help me understand, if I make this decision, what is that going to mean for my organization? And this is the platform that's going to allow that as we integrate this with AI capabilities.
That's great feedback. Thank you. I'm going to point to Karen now. Karen from Salesforce. You've got such a breadth of experience with bringing these capabilities to bear for organizations. Do you want to go over a couple of your experiences?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Paul. I'm really happy to be here today. So my background's in epidemiology. So I just grinned when Liam was talking about some of the analytics use cases. But I also feel really strongly about the power of a platform for population health use cases, which is the type of sort of health service delivery that governments are so often involved in. And unfortunately, it's not an area that is well served by traditional clinical information systems or EMRs or EHRs, which are very encounter-driven, very focused on insurance and billing and those sorts of things. But taking a population health view is, again, a really powerful opportunity when you've got, as Liam has described, all of your data about your cohort in one place. And Salesforce is a world's #1 CRM. Again, that there's something fundamental about putting the patient or the citizen or the constituent at the center of their data and actioning programs, applications, and data around the individual. So there's a lot that can be unlocked with just that fundamentally different approach to modeling the data and the service. My background is an epidemiologist. I mentioned I ran the public health technology division for the Ontario Ministry of Health up here in Canada for very many years. And that's about a population of 16 million, so a large health jurisdiction. And I was running a really typical ministry IT shop, right? Tons of legacy stuff, tons of on-prem stuff. I'm dating myself here, but we were still using the same 18-year-old system I built after SARS for case and contact management when this pandemic hit. And I know I'm not unusual there. There's a lot of people who were using systems even older than that, if they were lucky enough to have a system. Well, we took a gamble. We were very lucky, and we learned how to do platform software as a service in the context of pandemic priority. I called it pandemic privilege because Liam mentioned some of the restrictions that tend to slow down government IT projects really got out of the way. And it really demonstrated what is possible when you have all of these resources and focus being brought to bear on a problem. In Ontario, we built everything for the pandemic on Salesforce. Started with case and contact management. That took us about 5 weeks for 34 health units, so a ton of inconsistency and heterogeneity in the process. And then we also ultimately did all of our immunization management, and that included all of the inventory, all of the scheduling, and all of the doses and arms, like the dose recording and dose tracking. So we used it for clinical purposes. At peak, we had 90,000 immunizers using Salesforce to record these doses. So that kind of scale, it gives me a lot of anxiety thinking about how we would have approached that in an on-prem world. So it wouldn't have been possible. We needed the scalability of a platform that had that deep infrastructure. It also meant that we could focus on delivering functions that were useful to the end users, as opposed to, so often all of my development cycles would go to patching aging middleware or just kind of shoring up security stuff. And we rarely, if we were lucky, maybe 1 or 2 releases a year would we get new features for the end users. With the platform approach in COVID, we were dropping 2-3 sprints a week. And these were full feature sprints for our end users. And we did a lot of, I like to joke that if you worked in public health and you had a pulse, congratulations, you're a contact tracer during COVID. So we had people where this was not their day job, and it's a complex job. So we had librarians and dietitians all doing contact tracing. In regular times, a really good experienced contact tracer can do maybe 10 cases a day. With COVID and with all of the kind of workflow scripting, making sure they had the latest and greatest guidelines, which I remember one day the guidelines changed 3 times in one day at the beginning of the outbreak when the science was evolving so quickly. So making sure that those contact tracers had the latest and greatest when it came to incubation period and quarantine and all of that. We gave them chatbots, so process automation. Liam talked about the power of AI for analytics. Absolutely. But I think there's a ton of opportunity for process automation. We put in AI chatbots for some of the routine work that contact tracers do, things like quarantine and isolation management. Again, I had to get a phone call every day to say, what's your temperature? All of that we handled through chatbots, and that took the capacity of the contact tracing team almost an order of magnitude higher. So they went from being able to do 5 to 10 cases a day to 50 to 100 cases a day. And there's a tons of lessons outside of pandemic pace that applies to. All government services are being asked to deliver more with fewer resources. So we need to look for tools that can help our humans be more efficient and effective in their program delivery. And that's an area that I think there's a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So the automation can be quite a big force multiplier, and that's what these platforms do. Is they provide you a great way to enable automation, right? Hopefully we've all learned some lessons from the COVID privilege, and can keep that momentum going. I'm going to throw in a use case, and what I'm hoping is that the team can collaborate a little bit on the use case and talk about how low code can solve this problem for the government. By the way, this is a live problem that came out on RFI. We're just going to spend a few minutes talking about it. So the use case is ORR, is unaccompanied children's applications. They have an existing portal application that's going through modernization. It needs to do case and document management, track status of different things such as maintaining sponsors, children, and facilities information, and tracking and providing detailed analysis information about those things and programs and facilities. So this sounds very similar to some of the things that that we heard about from both Karens as well as Liam. You guys want to talk about, and I want to pull Dustin in on this as well, but you guys want to talk about how you would approach solving this problem with Salesforce?
I'll kick us off, Paul. Could you go back to your other slide just for a second?
Sure.
Whenever we're talking about these modernization projects, to me, I'm looking at a set of silos, a set of legacy applications that are doing their job, right? And they're generally set up just to do their job. Integration becomes more and more important, right? So now we have another layer of integration in between all of these silos. And what we're trying to push people into when we're doing these modernizations is exactly what Karen said. She's delivering to prod in 5 weeks. That's fast, right? So now let's flip it back to the other slide. So we're looking at a modernization of these applications and how we're going to do that. And in my opinion, you have to stay agile, and the more usable code or low code that you can push out to your stakeholders and users faster is better, right? So to me, and I don't know a whole lot about this use case, but I would try to pull out one of those silos, modernize what I could with the low code, and get that pushed out to the users as quickly as possible. With the culture being that now we are starting to push things out to our users faster. We want usable code going in every month, not every 6 months or every 8 months. We want to really push the speed, push the capabilities of the team, and use all of those different modules that Salesforce, since you're here, have put out there for us to integrate with. You can use a very small team to build out these low-code workflows very quickly, right? So to me, that's where I'd start. I'd start with our discovery. I would find one of those core features or functions that we could put into a low-code workflow. We could get developed and delivered into production very quickly, and we could build off of that, right? So a true agile. We're not going to be an agile team for a year and then deploy something. We're going to create an MVP, get it deployed, and continue to add features and functionality to that product over the months while the contract is going, to not only, to make our users happy, but if on our other slide, you've got all those silos. As we continue to build those features, it's going to break those silos down. We're going to increase our amount of integration, and we're going to make our users happy because we're pushing out so many new features for them in a modernized platform. So Karen, I don't know if you would agree with that approach or not, but I feel like you and I would probably be skipping together, holding hands, liking the method that we're going here.
Absolutely, Dustin. And I mentioned that we did the case and contact system in 5-6 weeks. We did the immunization solution in 6 days. I don't recommend that, but when it was required, we were able to deliver in just completely unprecedented timelines because we had the flexibility of the system. And at that point, we've been running for about 8 months, so we knew how to work that way. It was a very fundamentally different way to approach the problem, and the MVP was key. When we first started, when we put in our first implementation of our case and contact system, we didn't get it all right. We had it like 85, 90% right, but there's no way we could get it right. And the best way to learn is to listen to your users. So I got an earful from very, very many people for the first couple of releases, but then they started to realize they're listening. And they're hearing, they would call me up on Thursday, and actually I hosted twice a week, complete open rooms where you could come and yell at me and tell me what we were getting wrong. And they would tell us the problem on Thursday, they'd have it fixed by Tuesday. So that generated a lot of trust in the system and in the process. And it meant that they were more willing to give feedback to improve the solution and support their workflows because they knew that it was going to make an impact. So it's part of it is just changing the culture of how we tend to approach our IT projects in government.
So Karen, would you say it was a forced cultural change?
Absolutely.
Right. So we need more of that, I feel like.
It
And
was kind of sponsored by the pandemic, right?
well, I don't want it to be sponsored by a pandemic, but we really can accomplish a lot of things when we have that priority, when we have that demand, when we have that need that is so urgent. And I feel like low code, it makes that urgency happen. It makes things a lot easier on the staff to push those features out very, very, very quickly. And I don't know how we educate everyone on that, but I feel like there's still a lot of traditional waterfall things out there that really could be changed through using low code and leveraging Agile to make these things happen quicker.
Yeah,
I just don't know how to get that priority at the center, right?
I think you hit on a really important topic that I think, especially for all of us, many of us on this call, the responsibility of how to help and assist through that cultural change. Because we've seen it work and we know it can work, but really when it comes from the government standpoint, there are still a lot of, we're going to get our requirements and spend 18 months just getting our requirements. Unfortunately, a lot of time those people that are making the requirements or responsible for them are separated from the end users pretty significantly, right? The government is very good at separating the money from the users. And what that ends up doing is it ends up allowing the government to spend a lot of time developing solutions for problems that don't exist. And so meanwhile, simultaneously ignoring the ones that really are right there in front of the end user every single day. And that cultural shift, I think, is going to be significant on how to help collapse some of that and get the understanding that we can turn something around in 4 days that's going to better meet your end need. It's shocking still to this day. I know that, from my standpoint, the operational medicine folks, they demand things yesterday. They don't wait around for it, and they usually have a little bit more money to be able to sometimes make those things happen. That's their expectation now with any software system that's coming through them, is that it will be able to truly have agile releases, because they're going to expect to be out on the field on a Friday, and they're expecting to go back out on the field on Monday with something different that works for their needs. And there really isn't a way to do that without really institutionally changing their expectations towards being able to accomplish those goals. I think the other thing that's really fun about this particular thing is I'm not sure, really, we don't know all the requirements up front, right? Which is always a great way for agile development. But I think it also, from a low code kind of perspective, when you don't know those requirements and something new comes up, and that can be because of a constituency change or, a full governmental change. And here we are in November, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen, in a month and a half. We could have a total different set of requirements that are going to come out of this. And that could mean going back to the drawing board or making some mild modifications. And those are going to have two very different outcomes in this process. So I think when you deal with more uncertainty, the more and more low code you can go towards is really going to be beneficial for them. But I think we're going to have to really convince people that this is the way to go with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, as a consumer of healthcare products, I want that turnaround time to be also Friday to Monday, right?
Exactly.
I was just going to add that it's sort of what all three of you actually were saying, but to Karen's point, that whenever you build something in a traditional waterfall methodology, right, and you build this whole giant thing, and then we've all seen it happen, you spend all this time, money, work, you put it in front of the users, and they go, oh, I hate this, I'm just using the old way. Being able to do this agile, and then agile and low code are like peanut butter and jelly, right? Like it's like they were made for each other, because I have had the instance where, us, Team Koniag, we have built an automation for a user base that was based on the requirements we had. As far as we knew, everything was golden. And then we released it. And as Liam said, it gets in front of the people who actually need to use it. And they're like, this is not what I was asking for. And we turned that automation around with a complete overhaul in 1 week and pushed out something
Awesome.
immediately. And you want to talk about building the goodwill and support, you have just evangelized all of those users now are going forth and telling the whole world about the good work that you've done. You gave them what they want. You did it really fast. And once you really, particularly when you're beginning with the low code, with a cell of low code people working on these solutions, the best starting place is always like a quick win that can really get in front of a lot of users, because once you impress them, and I have had this happen. I've been at a conference talking about a low code solution team Koniag's built. I said the name of the solution out loud, and a person walking by stopped in his tracks and said, "What do you know about that?" And I was like, "Oh, well, we built it." And he was like, "I love it." So here's a person literally walking through a conference I don't know who stops me to tell me what the great work we've done has done in his life. So once you really convert them, I know I keep saying it like it's a religion, convert and evangelize, but that's what it's like. Once they see what this can do, it will change all of that.
Thank you. Hey, so I'm gonna pause everything for a moment because we promised we'd get to questions. So we're out of the panel mode at this point. Now it's for Q. We're gonna spend the rest of the time on Q&A. So the first question, with low code and no code programs, are they still customizable, or is it just an out of the box product? So they are very much customizable, but there are guardrails. You don't want to over customize you don't want to go to over customize, because then you have to maintain the platform. So you eliminate the benefit of having a low code platform. One of the Karens want to add to that?
I put my answer in the chat. So Karen,
Oh, okay.
if you
I
want,
didn't see it. Sorry.
but I said exactly what you said, Paul. Like, I think
Okay.
they're, sort of like the way I was using that analogy of a house, like a builder has 10 different house options and you're picking kind of the one you want to start with, but you can always choose a different countertop. You can add a fireplace or not, right? Like, there are customized pieces you can put on top. And so what you get is the benefit of you don't have to start from scratch. And so you have time and money and effort saving there big time, but then you can still make it your own and customize it. And there are so many ways within each platform has its own different set of customizable options and ways to employ those in a safe way, like what Paul was talking about. What you don't want is for your developers to go a little bit off the rails and just start writing a whole bunch of vanilla code that is not repeatable and not codifiable and not going to be easy to maintain over time. But so long as they're working within the rules and the setup of the platform, there are tons of ways that they'll learn more and more about over time to customize.
Very well said, Karen. I like to think of it as Salesforce is like Lego blocks, right? And you can build, it comes with kind of a pre-built kits, right? But at the end of the day, it's highly customizable, and sometimes too much so. Because if you get you can customize anything and build anything. If you get too far away from the core, then it becomes a maintenance challenge. And you're kind of like leaning back towards your legacy solution days where there's a lot of tech debt that you have to address. One of the benefits of Salesforce is it's updated 3 times a year for everyone. Everyone's on the latest release. So you don't run into the point where you've got something that's like 6 years out of support because no one's been doing the updates. That doesn't happen with the platform, but it's the balance. And that's where you need to work really closely with your implementer to make sure that you're not over customizing and find that sweet spot.
Yeah. It is always a challenge with any customers. We just want to set that up front. Like, don't break the value of the system, right? And you're going to get a lot of value out of it as long as you don't overstep. I'm going to move on to, it looks like the next question that hasn't been answered is one from Ben. How does this accommodate such integration necessities as data element dictionaries? Are they self-maintaining, or are a team of analyst architects required to keep track of the tiny updates that happen in each sprint? So your integrations still require architecture. So you still have to do the analysis. You still have to do some architecture. And if you use, say, Salesforce to integrate with another system, and that system changes, it could, potentially break. Karen, do you want to weigh in on that? Karen Hay?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the kind of thing you have to run like a really standard project. Be aware of your whole technology ecosystem, what's changing when, make sure that you're carefully tracking that so that you don't have, a data value change in your source system that's going to break things downstream. That said, there's a lot of easy buttons that come inherent with, things like MuleSoft, which is, I like to think of it as a Swiss Army tool for a knife for APIs, where a lot of the hard stuff is taken care of. And then you can focus your architects and resources on making sure that you're doing that due diligence when it comes to the data management and stewardship.
And I do think that there's a cultural shift that even has to happen with we've always done it this way, is to there's a standard way to talk about some of these things. And so when you can start moving towards some of those standards, you'll be changing with everyone else. And there are a lot of standards. I mean, that's healthcare. Fortunately, I do think we've made great strides towards coming up with at least some standard languages for certain things that help reduce, not eliminate, the need for how you maintain data dictionaries and how you translate that data between systems. In an ideal world, we'd never have to worry about it, but we know that that's not ever going to happen unless we're all on a global universal healthcare system sometime in the future.
Yeah. You either have to collaborate or formalize how you communicate, right? So now the next one is Randy. Randy just offered a suggestion that Salesforce Health Cloud could offer a lot of value to these use cases.
Randy clearly knows Health Cloud well. Thanks, Randy.
And then let's see. The next question, what shifts in organizational design are you observing? With the rising popularity of low-code solutions, are you seeing IT decentralization trends? And Liam, I'm going to give you first shot at that one.
Yeah, ironically, and you'd think maybe the answer to that is yes, but because it kind of lives in an easier centralized place, I actually feel like it does exactly the opposite. The hard button is to go out and do this on your own now. And so if that's the case, you're going to try to figure out, how do I push this back into a central kind of repository that already has all the tools, and I don't have to worry about getting another ATO, and it really starts to bring this together. I'd love to see a little bit of how do we decentralize some of the kind of sprintability and the thought process ability and get our users more engaged with some of those processes, because that's the risk on the other side of when you centralize a lot of this stuff, you don't always get the right people on board. But I actually think because it's so simple, it actually pushes people towards the simple solution, which is great.
I think we've got a lot of great examples where the OCIO shops pick up the platform. So they would do the management of Salesforce itself, and then they give out like orgs to each of the functional groups within their organization to do development of capabilities. That way everybody's all following the same requirements as far as security and policies go, but then OCIO is not getting in the way of the business of the organization, right? So it's good empowerment. All right, what helps you determine which low-code platforms to use for a given solution? Pega versus ServiceNow versus Appian. Actually, Liam, if you don't mind taking that one again. So you come from a position where you were helping make those decisions.
Yeah, so. It's a difficult question, right? In a lot of ways. There's probably a very practical answer more than anything else, which is a lot of times when it comes from the government standpoint, you use the platform that you have. Certain platforms are going to be better than others at certain things, but that may not be a viable option and solution. It is nice to always have options. Nobody likes the vendor lock, right? And so that is one piece that I think is always a consideration of how are you starting to look at that. But I will also speak out of both sides of my mouth, is that then you start talking about increasing costs, you start talking about increasing fracturing of data sources, capability sets, maybe even expertise on those platforms, and all those things become more difficult. So I think it is a really weird balance. I will say from a governmental, and I'm fortunate enough to not have been in the situation of having to make those decisions. My decisions were usually, what platforms do we have that could be utilized for the capabilities that we need, and matching those on an individual basis instead of looking for something, new out of the box, or trying to bring on a new platform because it needs to do a certain set of functions.
Great, thank you. And I think as an architect, the kind of things that I always advise our clients on, like what skill sets do you have? Who's a good partner to you? Like we know that Salesforce is a great partner to our clients. We work closely with them. We also have that with some other platforms, but Salesforce is here today, so we're going to talk about Salesforce.
And Paul, some of our clients have bake-offs now too.
They do.
That's something you could use to compare things.
Yep. And then we go back to that customizability of the platform, right? So if what you're wanting to do is going to break the platform, then you don't want to choose that platform. So you choose one that more closely aligns with your approach to moving forward. Okay, let's see. The next question is, low code needs to have change management. Of course, it's still building features. Got to have change management. It looks like, okay, I think, what does a released management lifecycle look like for these low code solutions? Karen, hey, do you mind hitting that one?
Yeah, I can tell you during the pandemic, I'm not joking when I said we were dropping 2 to 3 sprints a week. Do not recommend pandemic pace. But I was already running an agile shop, which made me kind of a weirdo in the government. But this was the first time we actually got to do real agile and not agile or whatever, the sort of weird hybrid that happens too often in government shops. So yeah, the release management lifecycle, you're still going to want to do testing. You're still going to want to do like your standard SDL stuff, but you will be amazed at how quickly many of the steps can be condensed, given some of the benefits of the underlying tools solutions. Dustin, I'm sure you've got some really good insights.
Yeah, Dustin.
Well, one of the things we mentioned earlier was field operations, and we didn't really touch a whole lot on that, but when you're running agile and you're putting things out there quickly, there's not only a person testing that on their computer, but we're also rolling these things out mobile ready, which I think it's just a huge bonus that we didn't really think about when we were talking about the benefits. So I just wanted to get that in, Paul, now that you're on the last slide. But
it's great. We're over time. We're 3 minutes over time, so I apologize for those of you that are still hanging on with us. This will get posted to YouTube. We would love to hear about your challenges. So if you have a challenge and you want to engage this team, we're ready. So shoot us an email. Anybody on the list, so you've got all the contacts. We'll post it up, and you can review the slides and review the video. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the panelists for showing up. I know it takes a lot of valuable operational time away from your day job. So thank you.